Hello, everybody. Welcome to What Would Your Ideal World Be? A new podcast which examines many important people and the important things in their lives, what they think about most current trends at the moment, what they think about certain subject matters, and of course, what their ideal world would be. Today's guest is David Vance, a conservative commentator and pundit. He is currently the editor-at-large of AltNews Media, a populist right news outlet, and has appeared on many other networks, including the Russian state news media Russia Today, or RT for short.
Hello.
Hello?
Hi, Edward.
Yeah.
How are you?
Fine, thank you, yourself?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. Friday evening, not bad.
Yeah.
Friday, the weekend beckons. Another week gone by. So yeah,
hmm
Friday night's night.
Fair enough, yeah. Thank you for coming on, by the way.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. It's always nice to be able to help people out if you can.
hmm
So please be here.
Thank you. So the first question I wanted to ask you was that, if you don't mind me using the colloquial term, what was your red pill moment? What got you into politics in the first place?
Ah, gosh, that's a memory test. I got into politics accidentally, so it wasn't any great master plan. Way back in the mid 90s, and I'll tell you, I got into it because I've been a businessman all my life, and I actually attended a kind of a public event, and they were handing out leaflets at the end of it encouraging other like-minded business and professional people to come together and just talk about issues. So I joined that organization and ended up being the chairman of the organization. And as part of that, actually, I detail it in my book. I did write a book published in 2007 called Unionism Decayed. And in that book, I actually talk about the fact that that's how I got into it. And because I was in this business organization, we met with political leaders. So I used to meet with political leaders of all the major political parties here in Northern Ireland, but also we met with people like, Michael Gove, for example. We remember meeting with him, Peter Hitchens, different people. So I got an exposure with all those guys way back then. And that I tumbled into it a bit more detail and actually ended up joining a political party and standing for election and all that kind of stuff. So that was my murky origins in politics, Edward.
hmm What was it like then meeting all these sort of leaders then? Because you talk about meeting all these sort of
Yeah.
political party leaders and all that. What were they like then? Because there was quite a cast of characters back then, I imagine.
There was, yeah, there was. I remember meeting David Trimble. David Trimble losing his temper. I can remember meeting Ian Paisley, who was a larger than life character. I met them all. I met all of them because I went through the whole Northern Ireland peace process thing, which I opposed, absolutely opposed. But I went through it all, so I met them all. What were they like? Yeah, they were just like you and me, and people watching this. They're normal people, especially when the cameras are off. I suppose, but some of them are. Yeah, I find lots of them were pleasant. Some of them were maybe less than pleasant. But yeah, that's just like life.
hmm What was your objections to the Northern Irish peace process then? What are your objections to it? Because I know during the 20th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement, you were quite vocal about your position to it on Twitter. What was your
Yeah.
why do you oppose such stuff at the time and now?
I, for the same reason. It's really there's two reasons I opposed it at the time, Edward. Two reasons I absolutely oppose it now. And it's simple. Number one, you should never, ever reward terrorists. Ever. Doesn't matter what hue they are, are they unionists, Republicans, doesn't matter. You never, ever reward terrorists. It's wrong to do so. It's morally, ethically, and politically wrong. So I had, so that was, I guess, you might say, a fundamental reason. And the second side of that was, just as you shouldn't reward terrorists, you should never betray the victims of terrorism. Now, I've lived long enough to know many people who didn't make it through all those years, and they lie buried in graveyards, and their families didn't have the life that they could have expected. So I suppose in my own way, I felt a kind of a moral compunction to oppose the terrorists and to do my best to support if you like, the victims. So I think that's a coherent strategy. You might take issue with me on it, but I think it's morally coherent, and that's why I led a campaign. Well, I was one of those in the campaign that said it was right to say no to such a thing. And I remember one of those who stood alongside me was Peter Robinson, who suddenly, some years later, became very prominent within the very thing he campaigned against. And that's the other lesson of politics. It's full of hypocrites.
Mm-hmm. And do you think that after that, do you think there's been some sort, I don't want to say eulogization, but there's been some sort of like media sympathy towards like maybe sort of like some of these Sinn Féin characters in the same way that, for example, like when Martin McGuinness died, there was a lot of like sympathy towards him passing away, and there wasn't much mention of his, terrorist activity, or when like Sinn Féin did really well in elections in mainland Ireland recently, they got a lot of positive press, whereas if it was, say, like Viktor Orban or some of these other characters in Europe, they would have gone, oh, the far right are taking over. Do you think there may be some hypocrisy there, given that these, at one point were actual terrorists? There's still, if I'm not mistaken, quite a few former terrorists in Sinn Féin's higher ranks.
Well, you see, that was another one of my revelations during the political years, the unbelievable hypocrisy of the media. But just to go back to the point you made there, Edward, I mean, essentially what we've had with Martin McGuinness and his ilk is it's the equivalent of saying, well, yeah, Hitler, he's a bad guy, but he was a vegetarian and he liked animals. He was kind of animals. So come on, you got to balance it up. So yeah, Martin McGuinness, well, he was a terrorist godfather on the one hand, but he liked to go fishing, and he was homely. So the absolute, for a long time, I guess one of my consistent themes, and I have been consistent in this one for, 25 years longer. I detest the legacy media, as I call it. And after all these years, my detestment has not changed. Just as they lied through their teeth and they facilitated what happened in the peace process here and sanitized, Edward, the most egregious acts and organizations like Sinn Féin IRA and like the UVF as well. I called them all out, and I got the death threats for doing so. So you always know when you're over the target zone, when you get fire coming back at you. But the media were horrific then, and they're horrific now over lockdown. Same thing, same media. It's changed a bit because of social media and whatnot. But for all those years, I was very pleased to, I guess, be a thorn in the side of the legacy media. And so, they did sanitize the actions of the IRA. And I mean, and the British establishment did as well. The British establishment, I might add, yet never has always betrayed its friends and basically, groveled to its enemies. That's one of the lessons of British history over the last maybe 150 years, I suppose you might say. So it didn't surprise me that they ended up, eulogizing Martin. I mean, the BBC were in tears when he died. I don't know if his victims, the families of his victims were in tears. Not sure about that, but no one talks about that because that's awkward. So they don't talk about Gerry Adams, his pedigree. You don't talk about these things. But I did. I spent a lot of time doing it, Edward. I said everything that needed to be said. I put it down in my book, Unionism Decayed, in 2007. I staked that in the ground. I stand over it. Nothing's changed my mind. I suppose the only thing I did make a bit like, you're way too young to remember, but Frank Sinatra, you've heard of Frank Sinatra.
Yeah, definitely.
Frank Sinatra, he retired once. Then he retired twice. He retired many times, but he made a comeback. I only retired, to be fair, really once. I retired from politics in 2001 because I'd had enough of it. And then in 2010, I actually came back, get revenge. And again, this was for I stood for small little parties, not big parties. I wasn't a political careerist. So a bit like the party I stood for in 1998, 99 was like the Northern Ireland version of UKIP. So it was, in fact, I campaigned with Nigel Farage back in 1998. So So that was my first venture. Having said I would never go back in 2001, I was persuaded to go back to a different party called the TUV in 2010. I was very happy to stand for the TUV, really great guy who leads that party. And I did that for a year or so. But, to be honest with you, again, you ask about politics, and I found that the problem with politics I had was it was a problem that Winston Churchill had back in the day when he was asked about the enemies being on the benches across. He said, literally facing him in the Commons, he said, no, those are my opponents. My enemies sit behind me. And that is exactly what I found. I couldn't be bothered with all the infighting, all the stuff that goes on behind the scenes. I didn't want to do that. It was boring. It wasn't something that, and so I finally did my final version of My Way and exited the stage in 2011, and I've never been happier since.
Mm-hmm. And you talk about sort of like the legacy media. Why do you think that the media has gotten so rotten and so on? Why do you think that's happened? Because I remember just today on Twitter when Viktor Orban, the Hungarian Prime Minister, showed up at Boris Johnson's thing, there was actual footage of reporters yelling at him, "Why are you supporting like an ally of Putin?" and certain questions like that, which were very slanted in a way that seemed a bit, I don't know, a bit churlish. It's sort of like activist stuff. Why do you think it's gotten so rotten with the British media? Do you think?
Well, you used the right word there. Activists. They're not journalists. They're activists. They're partisans. I saw this again, just to jump back in time a little bit. I saw this firsthand back in 1998. I remember being at an event where Tony Blair wasn't there, but Alistair Campbell was there. Alistair Campbell was there as Tony Blair's representative on Earth. And there was a bunch of legacy journalists around him. And honestly, it was like a fan club. It was Alistair this, Alistair that. I remember watching them and thinking, what a bunch of sniveling, low-grade, low IQ apologists you are. I thought that back then, and since then, it's gone worse. They're even worse. So yes, you're absolutely right. With people like Viktor Orban, I mean, he's a Nazi in their world. That's clear. But when you say what's happened to them, I can sort of offer you a theory, and people may maybe accept this or not. And here's the thing. Over the past 15, 20 years, certainly the last 15 years, the opportunity for, if you leave the BBC to one side and you talk about everyone else, all those media outlets have been hemorrhaging profits. They've been hemorrhaging viewers, readers, all of them. So they've become very reliant on government spending. And we've seen that with a vengeance since March 2020. So I call these people basically prostitutes, because that's what they are. They've sold themselves for the filthy lucre, for the, and so they have no standard. They have no standards at all. I don't see any morality left in, if there had have been any, Edward, and it's debatable if there was, I think at one point there was some, but in my view, there's none now. So these people are all sold out in every sense of the word, sold out to government, sold out to special interest groups. And the only one that is exceptional in that regard is the BBC. And the reason the BBC doesn't have to sell out is because it gets 3.8 billion a year thanks to the license tax. So it's a rotten cesspit. I was banned from it finally in 2015, 2016. I've been missing from the BBC now for 5 years. My heart breaks. And so it's only because the BBC can actually siphon the money off from the British license payer that they are not just as reliant as government. But again, in the past year or so, 2 years, we saw Boris Johnson back in 2019. Lest people forget, back in December 2019, pre-COVID, Johnson stood up and said he felt that perhaps it was time to finally get rid of the BBC license fee. He was going to stand up to the BBC. He was going to sock it to them. Look at him now. It's a marriage made in heaven. He needs the BBC as a propaganda outlet. and they want the patronage. They want a government not being tough on them, and this government won't be tough on them. And no government I think we have has had the guts to do it. The only one way back in the day was Thatcher. Thatcher was hostile to the BBC, but back then the BBC was so powerful. And obviously, again, the last 10 years, we've seen social media. Your generation probably, I'm sure I'm probably one of the veterans that will watch this on this channel, but younger people like yourself, who gets their news from the BBC now? And I think the answer is increasingly fewer people. So it's less powerful. So the government, if it wanted to, could defund it. But because it relies on the BBC, it won't defund it. And that's the game that's in play. That's what we see now. But, as for Jerry, I mean, I would, once upon a time, back way back when I was a student, believe it or not, a million years ago, I thought of being a journalist. I remember going for an interview in a morning newspaper. And I didn't get it, but I got to know lots of journalists over the years. And as I say, I met very few who I would call were principled people. I just seen a lot of opportunists who snuck up to the political class, who were in bed with the politicians. One is a parasitic relationship. I'll give you an example. You will be aware of some of those fish that you see, like some types of shark that swim through the water. And what those sharks need is they need these sucker fish to come along and feed off the parasites that might attach to the fish. That's the same relationship politicians have with journalists. It's the same thing. To update a metaphor. So.
All right. Do you think that the upcoming GB News Network might be a good balance to this sort of like stuff, or do you think it might just be another cog in the machine?
Yeah, no, I'm afraid I hate to sound depressing. I don't want to be a real downer on everybody. But I've always spoken truthfully, or what I believe to be right. GB News with Andrew Neil, and I'm sure I've seen some of the people in it. There's some good talent. There's some horror shows on it, like what's his name? Tom. Tom.
Watson?
No, Tom.
Howard.
Yeah, him. Oh, the one who was on who was. Oh, I'm not even going into his stupidity. It's GB News is governed by Ofcom. Ofcom does not allow for what I would consider to be honest and frank conversations. So I don't expect much from GB News, and I don't think I'll be disappointed. For those who think it's going to be, it's going to give it to the BBC, it's going to really give Sky and ITV and all a run for their money. I don't think so, because the other thing is, if my theory's right, and I don't think figures lie, fewer and fewer people are actually tuning in to TV. They're tuning into things like this. They're all over, the internet. They're watching podcasts. They're watching YouTube things. That's what I do so much of now. And you can get quite a big audience doing that. So I think the time for it is oddly enough come and gone. I'm sure it'll be done well. Andrew Neil's a consummate professional. I've got a lot of time for him, even though I profoundly disagree with, for example, his views on Donald Trump. I totally disagree, because he was very anti-Trump. People may remember. I certainly do. But I don't think it'll be better than the BBC. But that's saying nothing. And the only fun might be if they interview a couple of left-wing politicians and actually give them a hard time. That might be worth a few laughs, I suppose. But that aside, that's what I think of GB News.
Mm-hmm. And do you think that from that, do you think there's any way to fix sort of like mainstream media, or do you think like it's just a done deal because of online sort of stuff? And from that, do you think that maybe a lot beyond the fact that online and stuff is coming more naturally, and there's some people online who've talked about this, that the reason a lot of people tend to say YouTube or podcasts and so on is because it actually expresses possibly an alternate view? Like in America, for example, apparently there's studies that show people expect their TV to deliver like left-wing talking points, whereas as they go on YouTube, they find right-wing stuff. Do you think that's the reason why, or do you think it's just a natural progression anyways because of the way technology works?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Edward. Good question. And I mean, the answer, I think, is it's a bit of both. I think the medium is dying, the legacy medium is dying anyway. And it's dying because It's been so one-sided, so politically left, so toxic. All my years, I remember when I first got into all of this, watching the BBC back in the late 70s, say, and the hatred towards Margaret Thatcher's regime was off the scale. That was then. Well, it didn't get any better. It didn't get any better. So I think that medium was toxic and it alienated a lot of people, number one. But back then, there wasn't an alternative. They had the monopoly over communications. But since the dawn of the internet in the mid-90s, and then particularly with the advent of Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, the big tech or the deep tech platforms, which by the way have become toxic as well. But they changed the game. And because of that, I think people have now. I mean, you can go onto YouTube and Facebook if you want, and you can see some stuff. But then I think they're every bit as hateful and as bad as the legacy media. That's why I support all the new tech platforms, platforms like BitChute, like Odyssey, like Rumble, like brand YouTube. All there, and there'll be more. Because what I love about, despite my years, I love technology, and I really do love technology. And technology can continue to develop and innovate and create even better things. And even this, like Zoom, a couple of years ago, who knew about Zoom? So I just think technology will enable us to communicate, hopefully, and provide views like mine, which are absent from legacy media. And yet I think those views are perfectly reasonable, but they're not allowed because they challenge the establishment. And I've always wanted to do that.
Mm-hmm. And do you think that maybe one of the reasons why, there's, do you think that the possible left-wing bias in a lot of these things, what they call anyone to the right of Ken Clark, far right, and so on, in many of these media companies, is partially because of the fact that they are biased that way, or the fact that possibly also they are just trying to rabble rouse and get a lot of people to watch them who are on their side already, maybe as well? Or do you think it might be a bit of both? And what do you think about that, maybe?
Oh, yeah. Listen, I mean, I as I say, over the years, I've done many BBC programs, and I mean, for example, there's one particular BBC program I did, which was in front of a TV, in front of a live audience, recorded live, and the way they would do it is the host, who was, I'll tell you, it's called the Nolan Show. Character called
Stephen Nolan.
Yeah. So the game was they would bring on someone like me as bait, basically, and then the host would argue against me. The other guest would argue against me. There'd be then about 70 people in the audience. They would all be against me, and that's why the BBC called balance. Now that never stopped me. I couldn't have cared less. But the point is, the game was weighted against you. And you see, if you want to have decent discussions, conversations, this is how you do it. You have it in an environment where people are respectful towards each other. And, I'd be very happy to argue with another, someone with totally different views to me. I'm totally relaxed about that. But environments like the BBC, that's not what the game is. The game is to ensure that, whether it's someone like me, or whether it's, say, a Nigel Farage, or whether it's anyone such as Peter Hitchens is another good example, actually, where there's always a hostile response. There always is. And, I got so sick of it that I actually got to the point where I decided in radio interviews, in particular with the BBC, the first bit of outright bias and communication, I would just turn around and say, look, do you want to stop the interview now? Is this how it's going to be? Which is quite a challenging thing for a guest to say to the host. But I used to say that because what's the point? I'm not going to be beat up by biased legacy media. No way. And if I'm not going to be treated fairly, then don't waste your time with me, and nor me with them. And thus that's why my relationship with the BBC came to a preemptive end. Because they didn't like me, but yet they were quite fascinated by me, but they didn't hate me, obviously. They love to hate me, I think is the thing. But anyway, I had enough of that. There's too many things to do in life to waste your time, Edward, in hostile environments, wherever they may be.
Hmm. And do you think that also on that, what do you think the media then, because you're talking about lockdowns earlier, what do you think the media have got wrong in their coverage, say in Britain, for example? What do you think the media have got wrong? Because one thing that I seem to notice is the fact that whenever a new variant comes along, which if I'm not mistaken is variants are usually, affect, not going to, and all that sort of stuff. Like every time they're reporting, it's oh my god, this worst thing ever. Like, what do you think about what do you think has gone wrong with like reporting in the British media on coronavirus and the
Well,
lockdowns?
yeah. Well, your first question there was, what do you think the media's got wrong? Well, I'll tell you everything. The media's got everything wrong. They have failed at every level, back from March 2020 right through as we speak here in May 2021. And there's a number. I mean, the fundamental thing is that the media, I think, sees itself initially became part of what was Project Fear. And they've kept running with that, basically. Oh, it's the dreaded, Kent version, the South American version, the South African version. Oh no, it's the dreaded Indian variant. It's the new Thai variant, which comes with sticky rice. All this nonsense, all this absolute garbage trotted out by an unthinking, unblinking, simpering media class. And I remember all those press conferences they used to do back in March, April of May of last year, they were all trying to do gotcha with Boris Johnson back then. Actually, Prime Minister, didn't you do this? Shouldn't you have done that? Shouldn't you have done the other? And I had a degree of sympathy actually with Boris Johnson back then, because they weren't asking intelligent questions. They were just trying to trip off the Prime Minister. But since then, and this is the point, Edward, what's really changed in the past 12 months, so from about May, June of last year to now, the government has spent, I think, roughly 250 million in terms of TV and media advertising. And I also believe it's got another 300 in the budget for the next 2 years. So this British government is spending $500 million on propaganda, which I consider propaganda in the media. But that keeps the media very, very comfortable and happy. And everyone knows that disaster sells. If you can have the 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock news and it's X number of people have died, there's X number of new cases of new variants of this. Mind you notice there's always variants and they never tell us what it's a variant of. The China virus, never talk about that. Talk about the Indian variant. Never off what it is. But anyway, so the journalists have failed. They're a pathetic bunch who have never asked any tough questions. But then you get the journalists that you deserve. Maybe that's the other way of looking at it. But they've completely failed. This UK has become a totalitarian, thuggish state, in my view, over the past year and a half, and the media is part of that problem. Instead of asking questions and saying, Prime Minister, why are we locked down? Prime Minister, why have you taken away people's liberty? Questions which you would have thought independent journalists would have asked. But then, of course, the government only takes questions from the select few, the Laura Kuenssbergs, the Beth Rigbys, these are paid prostitutes.
Mm-hmm. And do you think also one thing that they've also failed to do is possibly have many anti-lockdown people on as well? Because I can only remember, like, on some Question Times, for example, like a Labour guy, Jonathan Ashworth, I think his name was quite shocked when there was 2 like anti-lockdown people on there, the Phones for You guy and Sunetra Gupta, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, who's an anti-lockdown academic, and she was taken aback. Like, do you think that they've closed the door on these people because they're a bit, closed-minded about any of this stuff?
Yeah, well, there's been a clear move again over the last year that people like Sunetra Gupta and others who have been questioning of the government strategy, bit by bit, they've been erased from the legacy media. And it's not just the BBC, I might say. I mean, for example, Talk Radio, which is another massive disappointment in my view. It's been very particular who it brings on. And certain people who used to appear on, people like Professor Mike Eden, just to throw out one name, there's no invites to those guys anymore. And so, really the British media as a whole have proven themselves to be easily bought off. And in exchange for the being bought off, They ride easy. So you get little contrived things like, oh, the Dom Cummings versus Matt Hancock. Yes, I said this the other day. Some people didn't like it, but who cares? That's a sideshow. I don't care
Mm.
about. I'm not bothered. Not bothered. I care about your liberty, my liberty, the right to get on with their lives, the right for British business to get back up and functioning, the right for people to have a job. Those are the things that I don't give a toss about. Dominic Cummings, or who's actually proven himself to be a right little totalitarian as well. Oh, what a surprise. I don't care about them. So the media will engage in little sideshows. But again, because I pay little interest to the media, it basically just goes past me. And I want to talk about the matters of substance, such as how can it be in a UK of 67 million people and six people or less a day die of COVID on the birth certificate in the past 28 days. And why is there any restrictions? Why is that? I'd like to talk about that. But when did you ever have hear that conversation on the legacy media? Edward, you haven't.
And from that, do you think like sometimes they focus on some of these issues to sort of like possibly, I hate to sound like a whatever, like sort of to distract from actual issues? Like for example, I remember like last year when the only time they started talking about, say, the mass illegal immigration that was coming across the channel was when Nigel Farage sort of like had to kick them into gear, so to speak, and even then he got a lot of criticism from that. Do you think that's a fault of bias, or do you think that's a fault of not looking sort of like what there's talked about in like manufacturing consent, where they're just too not necessarily lazy, but they just can't be bothered to look at some of these things?
Well, I think there's such a thing as distraction, the skill of distraction in politics. So it's, look at this hand and never mind what this hand's doing, right? So there is that in the political environment. And of course, governments are very successful in pushing out propaganda stories through the media. Every Sunday, if you want to understand propaganda, just look through the papers on a Sunday morning. The government fly kites. They fly ideas, they push them out through helpful outlets to see what the reaction is going to be. And so, if there's something annoying the government in one front, they'll talk about something totally different. Yes, I mean, Nigel Farage was doing the country a service, actually, by making us aware as a country of what was going on down in the southern border there with all the, the illegal migration, which Priti Patel, she who would pose as a latter-day Thatcher, what does she do? She actually press statements to stop them. Press statements. Yeah, that's going to really work, Priti, isn't it? And when you get them here, you're going to send them back. Are you? How are you going to do that? Haven't heard. Where are you going to send them back to? Blah, blah, blah. So, yeah. So, I mean, some of the big issues, like for example, the illegal migration, which is an absolute plague in this country because we won't talk about it, let alone deal with it. The government will shift the goalposts always, Edward, and instead they'll talk about, anything and everything. They'll talk about, yeah, but hang on a second, we're fighting for more diversity. So we can't be fighting, we can't be stopping migration. That's bringing us much needed diversity. Let's
and
face
doctors.
it. And doctors and rocket scientists, poets and musicians.
And the toilet cleaners, I guess, as well.
Yeah. So I mean, but and the thing about it is as well. I mean, of course, I'm a unionist, so I believe in despite the many tensions we have, but I do believe in the United Kingdom, all four nations. But there's no doubt about it that the whole illegal migration issue is particularly impacting on England, and I guess in the south of England. I mean, frankly, they're not landing on the beaches at Dover to get themselves to Northern Ireland like that. That ain't happening. And for that matter, they're not really going to Scotland. Why would anyone go to Scotland? I'm not sure. I can understand why people want to leave it, but not go there. And so these problems are impacting right into the conservative heartlands of England. And yet, you saw the election results there going back a few weeks. And you look across the England, and you see England going more and more conservative. And this is the stupidity of the electorate. The electorate are like, they're suicidal. They are supporting a conservative party, which is essentially, in my view, authoritarian with side serving of socialism. I mean, Rishi Sunak spending the cash more than Jeremy Corbyn ever wanted to. And yeah, because Labour is so absolutely abysmal and so hopeless, and because there's nothing else that people will vote for, that I can see at the moment anyway, people are voting for more and more authoritarianism that will not deal with the migration, which is affecting them. So, I mean, you explain that one to me. How can people be so stupid?
One thing that you brought up there, you talked about Peter Hitchens earlier. He mentioned the
Yeah.
fact that the sort of like when Boris won in 2019, won the general election, it was sort of similar, sort of like the wave of enthusiasm was sort of similar to when Blair won in '97. And he said like, oh, he doesn't know what's going to happen to sort of like the Conservative Party once sort of their, I guess, magic, as he sort of like, I'm paraphrasing slightly, runs out.
Yeah.
The sort of like when Blair's sort of magic died out, then the whole Labour Party started to collapse around him. What do you think would happen to the Conservative Party once, say, a lot of people start to not be pleased if the government doesn't do anything on, say, like immigration or civil liberties or other issues as well that matters to them? What do you think they're going to do? Do you think they're going to just abandon, or do you think they might vote for like a small third right-wing party, like say UKIP did a couple of years ago?
Yeah, you see, that's another great question. Great question, and the answer is that the politics in Britain has been set up essentially around a duopoly. You either choose a Conservative, or certainly in England, Conservatives or Labour, with Lib Dems kind of in a distant third. But now you've got the SNP, which is essentially dominating Scottish politics. You've got pretty, socialism and steroids in Wales under Drakeford and his abysmal mob, but they got 50% of the vote. So I'm not sure. Small parties, I don't think are going to do it. And again, sorry to rain on people's parade. People keep saying to me, David, but look, there's the Reclaim Party, there's a Reform Party, there's For Britain, there's whatever's left of UKIP, whatever. Honestly, just look at the last set of results. People are not, and they won't go there. So what could happen? Think about what happened to Blair. That you made a really good point there. Blair came in on a tsunami of popularity, and he rode that for about arguably 5-6 years, and then it started to go a bit toxic, and then he bailed out after the 8th year, and Brown came in for the last couple of years, and that was it. So I don't believe Boris is going to be a long-term fixture. I really don't. I think he will be found out. So, but whether they can put someone in to keep them going, I don't know. And then Labour need to completely change themselves, and I don't think they can. I think Labour is dead. That leaves the Lib Dems, and the Lib Dems, who I have no time. Don't get me wrong, I'm not a Lib Dem, right? But I noticed that, for example, they've started to take a much more libertarian position, for example, on things like lockdown and matters like that. And I don't know, maybe that will encourage, because they fight with the Tories in certain parts of England. They're the opposition to the Tories, not Labour. So forget about Labour. So the Lib Dems, if they restructured themselves, the thing is, they were so snookered over Brexit. They got themselves in such a pro-EU scenario that's not what the English people wanted. And so Boris, in fairness, was in contact with what the English people wanted in Brexit, and he sort of has halfway sort of delivered that. But politics moves on, so it's what happens now, and can this Conservative Party appeal to young people, given that it's wiped out piles of hundreds of thousands of jobs for young people in the hospitality sector? Is that an appeal? I mean, do young people like it? Oh, although maybe the agenda is that's a very parochial way of looking at the agenda. Maybe there's a bigger meta agenda above that. But I don't know how it's going to go. I know that the tension between the English Conservatives and the Scottish SNP, that's not going to end well, I don't think. Something has to give. Something has to give. I don't know what it's going to be. Maybe Scotland leaves the UK. I don't know.
Do you think one possibility to improve these parties is sort of like entryism, maybe like sort of like how in America a lot of Tea Party activists join the Republican Party and help to get Trump elected or get certain senators elected, or Aaron Banks tried to do in 2018 with the Blue Wave and stuff like that to get more socially conservative-minded people in the Conservative Party? Do you think entryism is the way forward, given that it seems like a lot of these small third parties are, I don't want to be too rude, a busted flush, so to speak?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I agree. I mean, I'll answer your question in a second. But the bit that amazes me, I'll be honest in this one. I watched those local council election results, and I saw what happened to the smaller parties that we're talking about. And we're not trying to be cruel to them or mean or
Sure.
anything, but the votes don't lie. And yet, what kind of amazes me, they pick themselves up the next day, and they're, yeah, we're going again. 4 years time, we're going to be back. And I'm thinking, seriously, like I can admire, I admire their dogmatism at one level, but on a pragmatic basis, they're going to make no difference. So that's reality. Now, to answer your question, entryism and all of that. See, I've got a problem with entryism. Entryism works. Entryism works, I suppose, in theory. But the reality is, you see, once you get inside, once you go, and I've seen this, you get caught up in it, Edward. You become part of the very thing that you wanted to change. Certainly in the UK, I've seen this first off. The idea that you're going to have these, plants who go in and will subtly change things. I'm not really sure how it works. And you see, that brings me to my final one of my points. I have no confidence in politicians. I don't care. I'm not looking to any politician anywhere to take care of me. I want them out of my life. I don't want them telling me what to do. So in a sense, I am divorced from the body politic. I just curse all of that, cursing all of it. And so it's problematical for younger people. But I mean, my point, I'm thinking, yeah, stuff them. None of them are in it for me. They're not in it for the good of the country. They're in it for themselves. But sometimes you have to learn that. So maybe if this is recorded in 50 years' time, it's played, people will either be able to say, well, he talked nonsense, or people will say, well, he was a prophet. And as you know, no man is a prophet in his own country.
And one other thing, maybe you talk about, like, again, the small parties. I don't want to dwell on this too much. Is like, well, do you think maybe a problem is the fact that there's so many small, like, little right-wing parties, for example? We have Reclaim, Reform, the SCB to some extent, and some of these other smaller parties. Do you think that the problem is, unlike, say, the left, who have, like, say, the Greens, or to an extent Lib Dems watching Labour's back, that in this country we have too many small right-wing parties, as opposed to like one big coalition, like say UKIP or whatever, to essentially hold Boris Johnson's feet to the fire? Otherwise, he's going to lose votes. Do you think that's part of the issue? That there's too many?
I do. I think it's another great question, and it's really hard to answer it because there's a proliferation of small parties, and they all remind me of the Monty Python movie, The Life of Brian.
Oh yes.
And the People's Front of Judea, which is a breakaway of the Judean People's Popular Front. And the only people they hated more, and this is how they operate. And I've seen it. I've seen these small parties saying, we're the only people who will fight, against illegal migration, who'll stand up against particular ideologies and all of that. But actually, if you look at their manifesto, it's all pretty much the same stuff. So I used to sort of maybe optimistically think, is there not a way you could bring together like a grand coalition? Because there's lots of good patriot people now. I need to say this. Because I've met them over the years, and even recent times. Patriotic people who see through the transparency of the Conservatives, and obviously, on the left end, they're not. But they need to find somewhere to be or to do. And so I used to think, well, could egos not be put aside? And this is, Edward, where it all falls down. could the egos just bite their lip? And let's form a grand coalition. And that means in certain constituencies, you coalesce around one candidate, and you put all your efforts into that one candidate. And it doesn't work. And I've been involved in conversations, and it doesn't work. And it doesn't work, sadly, in my view, because of egos.
Do you think there's anyone in this country, either in politics right now or just in or political commentary, who, if they say, so for election in your region, or you admire or you would vote for, like, hypothetically, if they stood in your area, for example, like, is there any other politicians or political commentators that you think actually are not too bad per se?
I'll tell you who I quite like. I quite like Lawrence Fox. I quite like him because he said some things which are kind of reasonably brave, stunning and brave, as he would say. So he's sort of courted a bit of political backlash by speaking the truth. So I quite like Lawrence Fox. I like Anne Marie Waters. She's a friend of mine, the leader of For Britain. I like, really nice person actually. There's some individual people I know that I quite like, some of the people that were in UKIP. But liking them is one thing. Can they be effective? No. So if that's the measurement, I don't. And as for political commentary in the UK, by the way, political commentators, what a spineless bunch we have. Honestly, that's why I very rarely interview political commentators from the UK, because they've got nothing worth saying. It's always sanitized. It's ameliorated. If you want to have tough, meaty conversations, that's why people should tune into my Wednesday night YouTube with Alana Mercer, who's a US paleo-libertarian. Now, you want to hear intelligent, tough conversation, muscular, tough conversations. You get it from people like Alana. Here in the UK, it's, oh, well, maybe Boris could be a little bit less that and a little bit less the other. Forget it. So no, generally, I don't have any time for much of the commentariat here in the UK, but then they don't have much time for me. As I discovered when I was when I was cruelly banned from Twitter, I discovered a couple of important life lessons. One of which was that the so-called British commentariat, who sucked up to me no end until September of 2020, were never so happy to see the back of me. So that tells you all you need to know about them, and maybe what you need to know about me.
And do you think, like, one other thing is that what do you talking about the US? You're talking about the US. What do you think? Looking overseas, like, do you think the US are in a better or worse position where they are politically? Because I know there's a lot of controversy around Joe Biden, a lot of the sort of failures of his administration, like the border and so on. Do you think, looking at that, the United States, like, do you think they're in a better or worse position than us? And given that the saying goes something like we're only a few years behind America, what does that bode for, like, the future of the UK? Do you think, if it does, then?
Well, another great question. I think the answer is, I think the US is in a better place than us. Not because of Biden. I mean, obviously not because of Biden and his administration, which is a nightmare administration. I think that if you understand what the United States is and the nature of their political system, you've got states like Florida and Texas and others, Missouri, South Dakota, where those states are sort of semi-autonomous, really, in a lot of the things that they can do. So we've seen Florida open itself up under DeSantis. We've seen lots of U.S. states just doing the opposite of what Biden can say what he wants. You're not, the U.S. president can only, on a lot of issues, can only make advisory statements. The state governors can do their own stuff. So I look over there and I see hope in that system where you've got that devolved autonomy, if you like, at state level. So I do see. So I think that's better. And I look at the fact that they actually have conversations about, for example, the need to get away from lockdowns, the need to get economies up and running, all that stuff. We don't have that here. So yeah, on balance, I mean, I've always felt 50% American in me. I must be somewhere buried in my DNA. I'm a frustrated American, and for all there's lots of things wrong in the States. I mean, I know it's far from perfect. And having said that, I was a very big Donald Trump supporter. And when he gets re-elected in 2024, that'll be another good moment.
I was about to ask you, funnily enough, about whether you think he was going to run again, but I just guessed that. What do you think? What do you think is going to be the future then of the right in America? Do you think that on the one end you have the people who support Trump who want to essentially keep his legacy alive, and essentially he's promising to run again and so on, and meanwhile you have to use Michael Knowles' phrase from the Daily Wire, squishes Republicans, sort of like the liberal wing of the party, who are trying to make it more about economics and trying to push certain people, and you have people like Mitch McConnell and so on. Which side do you think is going to win? Because it seems like they're currently, for now at least, a little bit of a tug of war.
Yeah, I think the MAGA movement is the thing that's important, not the Republican Party. I view the Republican Party with contempt. It's no different to the Democrat Party. It's the uni party. You know, we talk about the uni party in the States. But so they're the same. But the MAGA movement, which is essentially what brought Donald Trump in and which caused the revolution back in 2016, it hasn't gone anywhere. In fact, I think it's getting bigger. So if you actually wanted to talk about how we can make Britain better, we need a MAGA movement of a popular movement that, you know, can encapsulate the whole of the country. But over there, I think it's pretty obvious for 2022 for the midterms, which isn't that long away. You know, the US, that election cycle comes around very quickly. I think you'll see that the MAGA people, the candidates that they put up, people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, for example, those are the sort of people I like. I think more and more people like that will do well in 2022. Trump will then reveal in 2023 that he's standing in 2024. The media will have a collective hissy fit, wet their pants. That'll be great. And so we're going to see a lot of change over there. So I've got to say, my eyes are probably as much focused on the US as the UK, but I can see hope in the US. I can't see it here just yet. Maybe it will come, but I can't see it. And if you notice, like when Biden, and I think most people recognize Joe Biden is, you know, who's the most super duper authentically elected president ever. Let's remember that. Most popular guy ever. He does a live stream. I get more people than him, but never mind that. Biden, you know, I don't think a guy like that has got he hasn't got the energy. He hasn't got anything. And yet Boris Johnson was quick as could be to congratulate him. So we've got a rotten conservative government in this country, which is the same as the Democrat in the States, possibly a little bit less woke. And that's about it, you know. So yeah, I'm with the MAGA movement. Simple as that.
Two quick questions because we're coming to the end of the hour. The first I wanted to ask is about, like, say, do you think the possibility of, do you think it's because the electoral systems are different in the United States then, because they have like governors and stuff like that, which they can get like people like, again, DeSantis in, or Abbott in Texas, for example, Greg Abbott. Do you think that might be one of the reasons why they have possibly get more people on our sort of line of thinking up there, for example? And for the second one, do you think the reason that Boris is a lot more aligned to Biden is because they're essentially two peas in a pod in sort of like their thinking, like they're very sort of liberal, well, not centrist, but like liberal thinking, globalist, empty vessels, so to speak?
Again, okay, so let's deal with those. So in the first instance, yes, I think the nature, the way the US political structure is designed does help, if you like, people like us more. And it allowed the Tea Party to come up for a while. The MAGA movement, as I say, has absolutely flourished across the States and brought in some really, really great people. Could that happen here? I don't think so. I mean, I've had friends who, for example, were standing for election there in England in the past month. And I mean, so I was very aware of the process that they were put through and all of that. And the fact is, you know, if you are like a firebrand, let's say a firebrand, tough, right-wing Thatcherite in British terms, you've got no chance of getting yourself selected. Whereas if you're a quizzling, Matt Hancock loving, such a thing exists, you have probably a pretty good chance of getting yourself a run at a council seat, or maybe in an assembly, or potentially even a Westminster. So our system doesn't allow for what the American system does, and that I think that's the disadvantage of those of us who are conservative with a very small c. I'm a very small c conservative, but ultimately I think I'm as much libertarian. I don't want government. So I think that's the first thing that you said. Now, the second part of your question, I've forgotten. What was it?
Essentially, oh, crikey, I'll think of Oh yeah, the fact that Boris and Biden seem to be so aligned because they're essentially
Yeah,
peas in a pod, liberal, globalist, internationalist-minded,
totally,
anti-vessels. Do you,
100%.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm 100%. I mean, that's the thing. Along with Macron, I mean, you could rhyme them off. Macron, Ardern down in New Zealand. I mean, all you go around the world. We've seen the thing about COVID that it's most revealed is not how cruel the NHS is, or how busted our political system is, or how useless our media is. The thing that it's revealed most is globalism. What we've seen is Boris, speaking almost the same words as the likes of Macron and Merkel and Biden, and these are all essentially a bunch of a cabal of globalists who speak this, who have an affinity with each other, and they get on. Edward,
Mhm.
that's why Trump was so difficult for them all. I mean, that's why I guess people like me related so much to Trump. Trump walked into the room. I'm sure you saw those at many instances where he walked in, especially at gatherings of the G7 or the G10 or whatever it was, and like they all recoiled as if a snake had entered the room, but in fact they were the snakes and he was the snake handler. And so the globalists, unfortunately, are a plague upon all of us at the moment. We need to remove globalists. I believe it's an existential crisis. That's why Trump winning, if he could win again, and if the US in particular can fight back, that gives us all hope. So, so again, I guess so much of what I say, I look to the US in some regards for hope. They've got a great attitude over there, by the way. I speak to many other commentators there, and they're if the left thought that getting Biden and Kamala Harris in the White House, if they thought that was going to defeat the MAGA movement, my goodness, could they not have got it more wrong? The MAGA guys are more motivated. They're more motivated. They call it out like what it is. They've got social media platforms they can do that on, just like I have. And I think there's a real thing. There's an energy about it, And yet, if you look around the UK, do you detect an energy amongst those
Mm.
wanting to change? I don't see that. The small parties have an energy, but honestly, they're going around in circles. We saw it. They got, was it less than 1% of the vote, so they're just nothing. But in the States, it's different. So, but for Boris and Biden, I mean, they're so busy focusing building back better,
Mm.
along with Greta Thunberg and David Attenborough and all the clown world, all speaking the same language. I never thought I would despise a conservative government as much as I despise this conservative government. And yet, a lot of people vote for them. And if there was an election tomorrow, I think I saw a poll, they're running at about, what is it, 44, 45.
44% or 45, that's usually the general trend.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's incredible. So actually, if there was an election tomorrow morning, the Tories would get an even bigger majority of the people who vote. But to me, that makes me then question, well, maybe, I think the political system here is boss, but it suits the Labour and Conservative Party in particular. So again, I find myself now having sympathy with Greens and Lib Dems. We talk about, we need to have PR. We need to have PR. Well, maybe we do. Maybe we do. Need to have something anyway. In Northern Ireland, we've got slightly different systems, and they allow for at least a slightly bigger spread of political representation. But at the end of the day, if the only choice you have is Tories or Labour, then that's no choice at all, and I would not choose either of them.
Yeah, so one of the final questions I want to ask you is that you talk about like this sort of thing that's happening with the Conservative Party. Do you think one of the problems is that many of the higher elites, are a bit sniffy about maybe say a lot of its base and so on? Because you look, for example, at someone like Baroness Saida Worsley, who's saying that she's going to report the Conservative Party to the 1922 Commission because of supposed Islamophobia, because presumably a lot of people are not particularly happy about Islamic terrorist attacks and grooming gangs. So do you think
Yeah.
she's gonna? Do you think that's the part of the problem is the fact that people like her are just wanting people to the right of Ken Clark out of the party and just become essentially the Lib Dems with more right of centre economic policy and moaning about wokeness on occasion?
Yeah, this is the Baroness who never managed to ever get herself elected, and yet sits in the House of Lords. Yeah, I mean, Worsey is one of the most detestable specimens that I can imagine on the back. And yeah, it was Cameron that got her into position and whatnot. And yes, I mean, she is part of the enforcement mechanisms which would stop anybody in this. If you speak out on some of the issues you just mentioned in the Conservative Party, Worsey's going to be on you the next day, and you'll be sanctioned. You could be even thrown out of the party for speaking your mind. And yet she's an enforcer who was put in place by Cameron. Now she is enforcing from one particular perspective. I have to say, I was very pleased a couple of years ago. She blocked me on Twitter when I called her out on a few occasions. But yeah, people like her, but for every Worsey, there's another one waiting in the wings. There's all this kind of, there's so much wokeness. This Conservative Party is so woke. I mean, they pretend that they're not, but they really, really are. I mean, I'm surprised they haven't all got their pronouns in their Twitter bio.
Give it time.
Give it time and it will come. Yeah. And they're not standing up for the family unit. They're not standing up for the Christian faith. There's loads of things that people historically might have considered the Conservative Party would stand by, and they don't. And if you stand for nothing, then you'll believe anything, and that's sort of where we are. But yeah, Worsey, I never got a Christmas card from her, so that maybe, although maybe Christmas isn't that special a day for her.
Okay, so the penultimate question I wanted to ask you is that this is the title of the show, and I ask all my guests, what would your ideal world be?
Neptune. Neptune would be my ideal world. It's a long way away from the sun. It'd be nice and peaceful and quiet, and I wouldn't have to put up with woke liberals weeping and annoying me on social media. Yeah,
Fair enough. Yeah, so okay, thank you. And so thank you for coming on today. And if people wanted to find you and your work, how can they find you? What media outlets do you have, or social media outlets can they contact you on?
You can find me everywhere, everywhere apart from Twitter, actually. So you find me. I'm always me, by the way. I don't hide under other names. David Vance on Parler, on Gab. I'm on YouTube. I'm on BitChute. I'm on Telegram. I'm everywhere. I'm on Facebook, even although I hate Facebook. I'm on all those. I'm on all those platforms. And of course, just to finish with, I also operate my own sort of news and commentary platform at AltNewsMedia.net, which is a platform I set up myself back with a colleague 2017 to try and again provide a place for people who would be banished from the legacy media have a home. So I'm available in all good places, as they used to say. You can find me. Twitter's not a good place, so you can't find me there. And you shouldn't be on Twitter. You should be off Twitter. Okay?
Okay. Thank you for coming on. Yeah, have a great night.
Yeah, you too. Real pleasure to chat. Thanks, Edward.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this podcast, please like and share this video, as well as subscribe to the Ed Interviews YouTube channel, and also the Ed Interviews BitChute channel, and also look at my stuff on Mixcloud as well. I'll have more of this content coming in, and also subscribe to my Patreon subscribe star as well for more guest requests, as well as free copies of my old books. Until then, see you next time, guys.